A Leader's Job, Transforming Attitudes and Behavior, the Dale Carnegie Way.
Welcome to the video. Today, we're unpacking one of the most powerful and practical quotes from Dale Carnegie. A leader's job often includes changing your people's attitudes and behavior. This quote isn't just about management. It's not about giving orders, pushing productivity, or enforcing rules. It's about leadership in its rawest, most human form. Because at its core, leadership is not about control. It's about influence. And to influence people, you have to understand them. You have to care about them. You have to meet them where they are and then help them rise. Let's be real. People are complicated. You're not just leading tasks. You're leading attitudes. You're managing moods, outlooks, fears, ego, and potential. You're trying to guide people who are sometimes tired, frustrated, insecure, or distracted, and still help them show up as their best selves. That's no small job, but that's what leadership is, the art of transformation. And Dale Carnegie knew this better than anyone. His timeless lessons, found in books like How to Win Friends and Influence People and Leadership Mastery, are not quick tips or hacks. They're deeply human insights into how people work and how leaders can bring out the best in others. So over the next hour, we're going to explore what Dale Carnegie really meant by this quote, why changing people's attitudes is not manipulation, it's mentorship, the difference between compliance and transformation, tools and techniques to inspire genuine behavior change, real-world leadership examples that apply Carnegie's philosophy, and most importantly, how you can become the kind of leader who elevates the people around you. This is more than a motivational talk. It's a roadmap to influence, to growth, to impact. So whether you're leading a team, managing a classroom, parenting children, or trying to become a better version of yourself, this video will give you tools that can reshape not just your leadership, but your legacy. Let's dive in. Part 1. What leadership isn't. Let's start by clearing the air, by defining what leadership isn't. Leadership isn't barking orders. It's not standing at the front of the room, arms crossed, demanding performance. That's control. That's authority. But it's not leadership. Anyone can give orders. Only a leader can inspire action without force. Leadership isn't micromanaging, hovering over every task, rewriting every email, constantly correcting people. That's not leading, that's stifling. Micromanagement creates fear, not growth, and fear is the enemy of creativity, initiative, and trust. It's not just about KPIs, deadlines, or quarterly reports. Yes, those things matter, but leadership isn't measured in spreadsheets. It's reflected in team morale, in how people feel when they leave work, in whether your team trusts you enough to bring you problems before they become disasters. Here's where the confusion starts. Many people think management and leadership are the same. They're not. Managers maintain systems. They keep the train on the tracks, ensure schedules are met, and processes are followed. They operate through structure and control. That's important. Without managers, chaos would reign. But leaders go deeper. Leaders influence hearts and minds. They don't just maintain the system, they challenge it, evolve it, and elevate the people within it. Where managers ask, how can we do this faster? Leaders ask, is this still the right thing to do? Where managers focus on the what, leaders focus on the why, and most importantly, the who. And here's the truth. You can be a manager without being a leader. but you can also be a leader without having a title at all. Leadership isn't assigned, it's earned. It's about behavior, character, and influence, and that begins with relationships. As Dale Carnegie understood so well, changing behavior, inspiring people to grow, adapt, and rise, that's the true job of a leader. And it starts by knowing the difference between position and purpose. Part 2. Understanding the power of attitude. Let's talk about something that often goes unnoticed in team performance, something you won't find on a resume or in a project report. Attitude. Because here's the truth. Skills get the job done, but attitude determines how the job gets done and whether people want to do it at all. Attitude is the emotional filter through which we interpret the world around us. It shapes how we approach problems, respond to setbacks, treat others, and most importantly, how we see ourselves. You can have a team of brilliant, highly skilled people, but if their attitude is negative, fearful, or apathetic, performance suffers. On the flip side, even a modestly skilled team with the right mindset can outperform expectations, support one another, and rise to almost any challenge. Why does this happen? Because people don't perform based on skill alone. They perform based on belief, mindset, and emotional safety. Let's break that down. The psychology of belief and behavior. Modern psychology shows us that belief shapes behavior, not the other way around. If I believe I can grow, that mistakes are temporary, and that my leader has my back, I act with confidence, initiative, and resilience. If I believe I'm not good enough, that I'll be punished for errors, or that no one sees my effort, I start shrinking, I hesitate, I do the bare minimum to survive. This isn't just motivational talk, it's grounded in cognitive behavioral science. There's a concept called the self-fulfilling prophecy, the idea that what we expect, we subconsciously work toward, whether it's good or bad. If someone believes they're doomed to fail, they unconsciously sabotage themselves. If they believe they can win, even against tough odds, they access more of their creativity, persistence, and inner strength. That's the power of attitude. Part 3. What behavior change really means. 15 minutes to 23 minutes. Let's get one thing straight. Behavior isn't just about what people do, it's about why they do it. This is a crucial truth that many leaders overlook. If you only focus on changing someone's actions without addressing the emotions, beliefs, and internal motivations driving those actions, then any change you create will be short-lived, surface-level, and unsustainable. Think about it this way. You can tell someone to show up on time, hit a quota, or deliver a result, but if their mindset isn't aligned with that goal, if they're acting out of fear, confusion, or resistance, then you're not leading, you're simply managing compliance. And compliance isn't the same as commitment. Real leadership is about shaping behavior from the inside out. To do that, leaders must understand the psychological drivers of behavior. These include values. What does the person care about? What do they believe matters? Fears. What are they trying to avoid? What anxieties shape their actions? And goals. What are they motivated by? What are they working toward? Every action someone takes is a reflection of these internal forces. If a team member seems disengaged or resistant to feedback, the problem isn't just their behavior. The real issue is likely rooted in something deeper. Maybe they don't feel safe, or they don't trust the process, or they don't believe they can succeed. And this is where leadership becomes truly transformational. The best leaders don't just give instructions, they ask questions, they seek to understand, they lean in with curiosity and empathy. They don't say, "Why didn't you do this?" They say, "What got in your way?" or "What's going on beneath the surface?" Let's bring this to life with a real-world contrast. Imagine two leaders faced with an underperforming employee. Leader A is task-focused. They say, "Your numbers are down, fix it or there will be consequences." They focus on the output. They see the behavior, the missed goal, and push harder, hoping pressure will spark change. Leader B is behavior-focused. They say, "I've noticed your numbers are down. That's not like you. Talk to me. What's going on?" They get curious, looking beyond the action to the emotion, the mindset, the reality behind the scenes. And now ask yourself, who is more likely to actually change the behavior? Of course, it's Leader B, because they've created a space where change can happen from within, not by force, but through support, awareness, and partnership. This isn't about being soft or avoiding accountability. On the contrary, it's about building real accountability, not accountability rooted in fear, but accountability rooted in ownership. When people feel understood, they become more open to change. When they feel safe, they become more honest. When they feel supported, they rise to a higher standard, not because they're afraid to fail, but because they want to grow. Behavior change doesn't come from pressure. It comes from clarity, connection, and belief. So if you want to change someone's behavior, start by changing the environment you create as a leader. Start by asking better questions. Start by showing up as someone who sees the whole person, not just the results on a spreadsheet. When you do that, behavior change stops being something you force and starts becoming something people choose. And that's the key difference between managing and leading. Part 4. Tools to shift attitudes. 23 minutes to 35 minutes. So far, we've talked about what leadership isn't. We've looked at the roots of behavior, and we've explored how leaders influence not just action, but intention. Now, let's get practical. Let's talk about tools, real tools, that leaders can use to shift attitudes in a team, an organization, or even a family. Because here's the truth. Attitude is the soil where all behavior grows. And if the soil is toxic, if it's negative, fearful, cynical, or uninspired, then no matter how much pressure you apply, you're not going to grow the kind of results you really want. But the good news? Attitudes are contagious. That means, as a leader, your attitude becomes a silent broadcast that everyone around you tunes into. 1. Lead by example, because attitude starts with you. Let's start with the simplest and most powerful tool, your own example. Your energy sets the tone. Your mood becomes the emotional weather of the room. If you show up frustrated, short-tempered, or cynical, that spreads, especially to people in uncertain or emotionally vulnerable positions. But if you show up curious, calm, confident, and focused, even in the face of pressure, people take their cue from you. They begin to believe that steadiness is possible, that growth is possible, because they're watching you model it in real time. So ask yourself, how do I show up during setbacks? Do I speak possibility, or do I vent frustration? Do I embody resilience, or do I transmit anxiety? Every day is a chance to model the attitude you want to see repeated. 2. The power of appreciation over criticism. The second tool is appreciation. Now, this might sound basic, but don't confuse simplicity with weakness. Appreciation is one of the underrated tools of transformation in leadership. People crave recognition. They want to know their effort matters. They want to be seen, not just when they hit a big goal, but when they take small steps in the right direction. Too often, leaders fall into a trap of only speaking up when something goes wrong. The default communication becomes correction, not connection. But that's like watering a plant only when it's wilting, not when it's growing. Appreciation does something powerful. It reinforces identity. It says, "This is who you are when you're at your best, and I see it in you." Use it often. Use it sincerely. Use it to build people, not to flatter them. Appreciation is what makes people feel emotionally safe. And that emotional safety is what unlocks trust, ownership, and creativity. Next, you need to cultivate something deeper than cheerleading, a culture of belief. Optimism isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about reminding people that they are capable of rising to the moment, even when things aren't fine. You create this culture through repeated, intentional messaging. We can figure this out. You have what it takes. Every challenge is a growth opportunity. We've done hard things before, and we'll do them again. Belief becomes a culture when it's repeated, when it's visible, when it becomes part of how people talk to each other and to themselves. It's not blind positivity, it's grounded hope. And as a leader, you can't just say these things once. You have to say them often enough that they become internalized by your team, especially during moments of stress, change, or failure. 4. Use storytelling, vision, and encouragement to build identity. Finally, let's talk about 3 powerful tools that work together: storytelling, vision, and encouragement. Why are stories so effective? Because stories don't just communicate, they connect. They bypass resistance, they activate imagination, and they help people see themselves as part of something bigger than their to-do list. When you share stories, especially personal ones, about resilience, purpose, and growth, you help your team build identity. Vision takes that even further. As a leader, you need to paint a vivid picture of where you're going and who you're becoming together. That picture needs to feel real, exciting, and emotionally compelling. Then encouragement becomes the bridge. It's not just "good job." It's "this is who I see you becoming. I noticed how you handled that conversation. That's leadership. Keep going. You're further along than you think." These tools are how you start shifting not just what people do, but how they see themselves. And once that identity begins to shift, attitudes shift too. And that's when everything starts to change. So let's recap the tools. Model the attitude you want to see. Use appreciation more than criticism. Speak belief and build optimism consistently. Leverage storytelling, vision, and encouragement to shape identity. These aren't fluffy feel-good tactics. These are strategic tools that great leaders use to transform not just performance, but the emotional culture that drives performance. Change the attitude, and you change the energy. Change the energy, and you unlock the behavior. Change the behavior, and you change the outcome. That's how real leadership works, from the inside out. Part 5. Building emotional safety. If there's one thing that separates average teams from exceptional ones, it's not talent, it's not resources, and it's not hustle. It's emotional safety, also known as psychological safety. This is the invisible foundation of every high-performing culture. Let's break it down. Psychological safety is the belief that you can speak up, take risks, admit mistakes, and be your authentic self without fear of being judged, blamed, shamed, or punished. It's the feeling that says, "It's safe to be real here." Now, why does this matter so much for leaders? Because without emotional safety, people do the bare minimum. They shut down. They say what they think you want to hear instead of what they actually believe. They play small to stay safe. They resist change, not because they don't care, but because they're protecting themselves. Why people resist change when they feel attacked or judged? Let's be honest, change is already hard. It challenges routines, comfort zones, and identities. But when change is delivered with judgment, when people feel blamed, micromanaged, or embarrassed, their brain kicks into defense mode. Literally. Psychologically and neurologically, the human brain interprets emotional threat the same way it interprets physical threat. When someone feels judged, their nervous system says, "Uh-oh, danger." And now their priority isn't learning or growing. It's protecting their ego, their dignity, their sense of worth. So what do? They deflect. They avoid feedback. They argue or withdraw. They dig in and resist change, not because they're lazy or difficult, but because they feel unsafe. As a leader, it's not enough to point out what needs to change. You have to create the conditions where change is emotionally possible. And that starts with trust. How trust impacts openness to change. Trust isn't just a feel-good concept, it's a strategic advantage. When people trust their leader, they don't need to waste energy wondering if they're going to get thrown under the bus. They don't have to put on a performance. They can focus on growth, not self-preservation. Trust creates the space where learning happens. And the equation is simple. High trust equals high openness. Low trust equals high resistance. So how do you build trust? You do it with consistency, honesty, presence, and care. Show up the same way even when things get stressful. Admit when you make mistakes. Keep your word. Be present when people speak. Really listen. Care more about the person than the metric. Trust isn't built in a single moment. It's built in the thousands of micro moments when someone says, "You showed up for me. You had my back. You saw me." Coaching versus criticism, a better way to lead. Now, let's get practical, because there's a huge difference between coaching and criticizing, and most leaders never get trained in this. Here's the key. Criticism focuses on what went wrong. Coaching focuses on what can go right. Criticism makes people shrink. Coaching helps people expand. Let's compare. Criticism. You keep messing this up. You're not paying attention. Outcome: shame, defensiveness, fear. Coaching: I noticed this didn't land the way we hoped. Let's unpack it together. What do you think happened? How can we improve it next time? Outcome: ownership, insight, growth. Criticism says, you're the problem. Coaching says, you're capable, and I believe in your ability to improve. Coaching isn't soft, it's strategic. It's about drawing out the best in someone, not by forcing, but by partnering. Here are a few coaching tactics that build emotional safety while still holding high standards. Ask more than you tell. What do you think you could do differently? Be future-focused. What's one shift we can try going forward? Normalize growth. Everyone hits bumps. What matters is how we respond. Separate the action from the identity. This result doesn't define you. Let's learn from it. This is how you create a culture where feedback isn't scary, it's welcomed. Where people don't fear failure, they embrace it as part of the process. Final thought for this section. People don't grow when they feel judged. They grow when they feel safe, seen, and supported. Emotional safety is not optional if you want lasting change. It's the engine of innovation, resilience, and high performance. So build it, protect it, model it. Because when people feel safe, they take risks, they speak truth, and they become who they're capable of becoming. Practical leadership techniques. By this point, we've explored a lot. What leadership isn't, how behavior works, how to shift attitudes, and the role of emotional safety in creating real, lasting change. Now it's time to bring all of this down to ground level. Because here's the reality. None of these ideas mean anything unless you can translate them into action. So in this section, we're going to get tactical. We're going to cover real leadership techniques you can apply, not someday, but starting today. Let's dive into 4 practical strategies. 1. Mindset-focused one-on-ones. Let's start with one of the most overlooked but high-impact tools a leader has, the one-on-one conversation. Now, most leaders treat one-on-ones like a task update. They go down a checklist. Where are we on this? When will that be done? Any blockers? And while execution is important, that approach misses the real power of a one-on-one, the chance to influence mindset. Think of one-on-ones not just as status checks, but as relationship-building rituals. These are moments to coach, encourage, recalibrate, and reconnect. Here's how to shift the dynamic. Start with them. How are you doing? Really? Ask growth-based questions. What's been challenging you lately? What's something you're proud of that I might not have seen? Where do you feel stuck or unsure? Reaffirm belief. I trust your instincts on this. Give identity-based encouragement. You've become someone the team relies on, and I see that. In other words, use one-on-ones to feed the roots, not just trim the branches. Because when you invest in someone's mindset consistently, you don't just get better performance, you get stronger people. 2. Build rituals and habits that shape culture. Next up, rituals. Culture isn't defined by your company handbook or mission statement. It's shaped by what happens regularly. And smart leaders use rituals to shape the emotional climate of a team. Rituals don't have to be complex. In fact, the simpler, the better. A few examples. Start meetings with shout-outs. Celebrate small wins or examples of someone living out the team's values. Weekly reflection questions. Send a prompt like, "What did you learn this week?" or "Where did you grow the most?" Ritualized learning time. Reserve 15 minutes every Friday for team learning, reading, or peer coaching. Failure of the Week awards. Normalize risk-taking by highlighting smart mistakes and what was learned. These small, repeatable behaviors send a powerful message. This is who we are. This is what we value. This is how we grow together. Habits form individuals. Rituals form teams. And over time, these rituals shape a culture where people thrive. Over time, these rituals shape a culture where people thrive. 3. Use small wins to inspire big shifts. Next, let's talk about momentum. One of the best ways to create belief, especially in uncertain environments, is to focus on small wins. Why? Because small wins are visible, they're achievable, they create a feeling of progress, and progress is deeply motivating. Think about it. When someone sees that they're moving forward, even just a little bit, their brain releases dopamine. That feeling of, "Yes, I did it," makes them want to keep going. Leaders can harness this by breaking big changes into bite-sized goals, celebrating every forward step, even imperfect ones, tracking visible markers of growth. "Hey, that's your third successful client call this week. You're leveling up." Saying things like, "That may feel small, but that's the shift that leads to the big breakthrough." Small wins build belief, and belief leads to bolder action. When people feel like they can win, they start acting like winners. That's how you spark a cultural shift, one small victory at a time. And finally, one of the most grounding, motivating leadership tools of all, role clarity and purpose. You'd be surprised how many team members are walking around confused about what their role actually means. Not just what they do, but how it fits into the bigger picture. When people lack clarity, they default to self-protection. They hesitate, they check boxes, they operate in silos. But when people know their role, and more importantly, when they know why it matters, everything changes. Their work becomes personal, meaningful, energized. Here's what leaders can do. Define roles clearly, not just the tasks, but the impact. You're not just writing reports, you're giving us insight that helps the whole company make better decisions. Connect individual work to team mission. What you're doing here directly supports our mission to serve clients with integrity and speed. Revisit purpose often. Purpose is like a muscle. It needs to be exercised. Remind people what the work means. Tell stories. Share client feedback. Let people see the effect of their effort. And when you align role clarity with purpose, you activate one of the strongest human drivers, contribution. People want to feel useful. They want to know they matter. Great leaders don't just assign tasks, they assign meaning. To recap, Here are 4 leadership techniques you can start using immediately. Use one-on-ones to shape mindset, not just check progress. Create small rituals that reinforce your team's identity and culture. Celebrate small wins to build momentum and belief. Clarify roles and connect work to a larger purpose. These aren't extras. These are the levers that help you transform a team's energy, outlook, and performance sustainably. Remember, leadership is less about dramatic speeches and more about consistent behaviors. The best leaders do the small things that move people in big ways, again and again and again. Case studies and examples. 52 minutes to 57 minutes, 00. To bring all these leadership principles to life, let's step out of the theory for a moment and step into real stories. Because leadership doesn't live on a whiteboard. It lives in classrooms, locker rooms, boardrooms, and it shows up in the choices people make when no one's watching. Let's look at 3 powerful, true-to-life examples of leaders who created transformation, not by controlling people, but by changing attitudes, beliefs, and self-perception. 1. A CEO who turned around a toxic company culture. Let's begin in the corporate world. Several years ago, a mid-sized tech company, about 300 employees, was in chaos. Talent was fleeing, deadlines were missed, morale was rock bottom, and Glassdoor reviews painted a picture of fear, micromanagement, and burnout. Then came a new CEO. Not a flashy one, not someone with a savior complex, just someone who listened first. In her first 90 days, she didn't issue sweeping reforms or launch major initiatives. She sat in on team meetings, she held open Q&As, she met with frontline employees individually, from engineers to receptionists, and asked them one question: what's getting in the way of your best work? She discovered the problem wasn't performance, it was fear. Fear of judgment, fear of punishment, fear of speaking up. So she started small. She instituted failure share sessions, where teams openly discussed what didn't work with no blame. She introduced a weekly recognition ritual called Spotlight Fridays, where employees could nominate peers for living out company values. And most importantly, she modeled vulnerability. She admitted when she messed up. She asked for feedback and acted on it publicly. Over the next 18 months, retention improved by over 40%. Internal promotions increased. Productivity rose without anyone working longer hours. And employee surveys showed a 3x jump in the words safe, valued, and motivated. This is what happens when leadership stops being about control and starts being about culture. 2. A teacher who changed student behavior through belief. Now let's shift to a very different setting, a public high school in a low-income district. Miss Rivera taught 10th grade English. Her students came from tough backgrounds. Many had failed multiple classes, some had absentee parents, and several were already being written off by the school system. When she first walked into her classroom, she didn't see bad kids. She saw disconnected belief. They didn't believe they were smart. They didn't believe their voice mattered. They didn't believe they had a future worth preparing for. So she made a radical decision. Every single day, she spoke to their identity before their academics. She greeted each student at the door by name. She posted inspirational quotes on the whiteboard, not random ones, but ones tied to the students' lives. She used their writing assignments, not just to teach grammar, but to ask, "What do you believe about yourself?" And she never allowed them to say, "I'm not smart," without challenging it. She'd say, "You're not failing, you're figuring it out. Smart isn't about knowing, it's about growing." At the end of that year, her class had the highest reading score gains in the district. More than half of her students signed up for AP courses, and several wrote in their end-of-year journals, "This is the first time I felt like I wasn't invisible." She didn't teach with threats or punishment. She taught with belief, and belief transformed behavior. 3. A coach who rebuilt a losing team by changing self-image. Now let's move to the world of sports. Coach Thompson inherited a broken basketball program at a small college. The team had just finished a 2-28 season. Players were demoralized, practices were sloppy, fans had stopped showing up, and morale? Non-existent. In his first team meeting, he didn't talk about playbooks, conditioning, or stats. He asked one question: who do you believe you are as a team? Most players just stared. One shrugged and said, losers, I guess. That's where Coach Thompson started, not with skills, but with self-image. He put mirrors in the locker room, literally, with the words future champion written at the top. He banned the phrase, I can't. He made each player write a letter to their future self, describing the kind of athlete and person they wanted to become. He ended every practice with one phrase: you don't become great when you win, you become great when you believe you can. The first year, they went 9-19. The next year, 17-11. By year 3, they made the conference finals, with nearly the same roster that had once been at the bottom of the league. What changed? Not just talent, not just conditioning. What changed was their identity, because one leader helped them rewrite the story they believed about themselves. Final thought. In every story, whether it's a CEO, a teacher, or a coach, we see the same pattern. The leader didn't change people by forcing behavior. They changed them by shaping belief, rebuilding identity, and creating the emotional space for growth. This is what leadership really is. It's not about controlling outcomes. It's about creating environments where people believe they can become more. And when they believe it, they prove it. Leadership is not about force. It's about influence. Great leaders don't force people to change. They inspire them to. They don't rely on control, pressure, or manipulation. They rely on trust, empathy, vision, and above all, belief in others. They understand that change, real change, doesn't happen in task lists or team meetings. It happens inside people. It starts with mindset. It spreads through attitude, and it becomes visible through behavior. When a leader shows belief in someone who's doubting themselves, when they create a space where people feel safe to grow, to stumble, to speak up, when they model courage, patience, and purpose, even under pressure, that's when transformation begins. Let's recap the journey. In part 1, we clarified what leadership isn't. It's not just management, authority, or metrics. It's not barking orders. It's personal. It's relational. In part 2, we explored why attitude is everything. Skills are only half the story. The other half is how people feel about their work, their leader, and themselves. And throughout this video, we've seen that changing attitudes isn't manipulation, it's motivation. And that motivation starts with trust, belief, and emotional connection. Dale Carnegie built his legacy on these principles. He believed in the power of personal transformation, and that change always begins at the top with the leader. You, as a leader, have more influence than you realize. You're not just responsible for the tasks your people do. You're responsible for the energy they bring, the confidence they build, the beliefs they carry long after the job is done. Every day, you're shaping futures. Every conversation, every reaction, every decision, you are modeling what leadership means. And here's the final truth. The kind of leader you are determines the kind of people they become. So be the spark, be the example, be the one who changes not just behavior, but lives. If this video inspired you, subscribe for more deep leadership content rooted in timeless wisdom like Dale Carnegie's. Comment below. Share a moment where a great leader changed your life or where you stepped up and led with heart. And share this with someone who's leading today or someone who aspires to. Because the world needs more leaders who build people, not just projects. Thanks for watching. Now go out there and lead the way, the Carnegie way.